Okay, here we go. Now we're good to go. Alright, so we just played that video where you guys were introduced to a whole bunch of stuff that apparently doesn't appear in the Bible, right? There's some people have those Bibles that have like an extra chapter, so it's like opinions 1 verse 5 and stuff like that. Now, where do we get all this weird stuff that we do on the Pesach night? So we're going to learn about that tonight and about the Haggadah. So I'll explain this to you guys tonight, and hopefully you guys will be more prepared for the night itself. We'll be able to know what's going on, when what's going on, and why what's going on. So you'll be a lot more comfortable on Pesach night when you do it, if you know what on earth you are doing, right? So you study for a test so you can ace the exam when you get to the exam. Okay, so that video that I just showed you guys about things that don't appear in the Bible comes from this DVD called Finding the Seder in the Bible. I'm not going to play the whole video for you guys tonight because I'm scared you'll fall asleep because it's a bit monotonous and it's interactive if we talk. So instead of playing the whole video, I think we'll go through. I've summarized most of what they do in the video, plus I've added a whole bunch of extra stuff from the Talmud just to help you guys get the fullness of what's going on in the Haggadah every single year. Okay, so on Pesach night, the Pesach Seder, we've got a whole bunch of traditions that look like they come out of nowhere, right? None of those things we just read sounded like they came out of the Bible, hey? You realize some of it was balancing on your left buttock and drinking cough syrup, right, and eating the cardboard, etc. So there's a lot of symbolic food, there's a lot of songs we sing on Pesach night, we recite a bunch of verses, we recline while we drink and eat as well, which I don't think many of us do in normal days, do we? No one has royalty, right? When we pour our wine, we don't pour for ourselves, we pour for the person next to us so that you can be served on this night. The kids ask a whole bunch of questions on Pesach, we play hide and seek with a piece of matzah. Is any of this stuff actually biblical, or are we just doing it because it's fun? That's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to try and figure out if any of this stuff is biblical. Okay, so what is that thing on the top right? That's a Haggadah. We're not studying Haggadah, we're studying Haggadah. Right, very easy mistake to make. Keep that in mind. Don't confuse them. We definitely don't want any Haggadahs on Pesach. It's not kosher, by the way, in any way. All kosher for Pesach. I personally think those things carry demons around. But anyway, let's carry on. So what is a Haggadah? It's a book that sets forth the order of the Pesach Seder, the whole night. Basically, it helps us to keep all the commandments we need to keep and help us to keep on track with what we're doing at the Pesach Seder. Now, it consists mainly of 15 steps. So it's you guys have heard of those like 10-step guide to get you to heaven or whatever. This is our 15-step guide to help you survive Pesach, or at least Pesach night. It helps us fulfill all the mitzvahs of the specific Pesach night. Do you guys know any of the mitzvahs for Pesach night? How do you think about it? Specifically for the night though. No, that night before you go to sleep. No, it's a bit confusing. Eh? There's nothing that you can think of straight away that says on Pesach night you shall do this. All this cough syrup and all these letters and all this weird stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to look through our Haggadah that we're going to use this year. I was supposed to bring some with so I could let you guys follow along, but I didn't. I made a big mistake. Hey? Oh, no, I didn't have any wine. What's he talking about? So this is the Haggadah that we're going to be using this year at our Seder. It's the beginner's Haggadah, for those of you that aren't familiar with everything we do. It's called the Master's Table, and it's very nice. It's very interactive. There's nice pictures, so the kids will stay awake and stay interested, and they'll enjoy it. So that's one type. That's the one we're using. It's a new one that First Design brought out last year, so we've never used it before. So it'll be fun to do it. Usually we always use this one. This is the more traditional one that we always use from Foz. Actually, this is from Vine of David. This is a lot more intense. It's a lot thicker as well. So you can see, here's the one we're using this year, nice and thin. It's also nice and cheap, by the way. And here's the one that we are going to use other years. It's a bit thicker. It's got a whole lot more content in it. Lots of more quotations from the Talmud, etc., etc. And you get a whole bunch. So this is called the Rabinowitz Haggadah. This is actually the oldest Messianic Haggadah. Well, it's actually the very first one that's been printed. So they brought it out just as a memorial. It's very short though, so it's not one I would suggest using today, now that you have all these other resources. But you get some very nice ones. So I've got this one as well. You just can feel it afterwards. You guys must come up here and feel this Haggadah and check it out. It's beautiful the way that they set it up and the writing and how they put the lettering and everything. That's nice. That's a nice one. I've got one from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. Brought this one out, I think, 2 years ago or last year. So I've got his as well. It's a very nice one as well. And then I've got this really cool one. Check this out. Check this out. This is a, what do you call this thing? A pop-up Haggadah. Have you seen those books where you pull things and they pop up like 3D? Yeah, so I've got a pop-up Haggadah. Let me see if I can find you guys something to show you. So this is where the Egyptians are beating us. I want to show you guys the other one. It's another cool one, yeah? Okay. This is us splitting the sea. You see that? This is awesome Haggadah, eh? Anyway, so you get all sorts of different types. You get children's Haggadahs as well. And this is the old one. This one, by the way, is interesting because it's based upon a Haggadah that was found in the year 1300. It's currently in the Israel Museum. It's a Haggadah where they painted pictures as well, but the characters of the story all had like birds' heads. So they made this in commemoration of that Haggadah that's in the museum, and that's like, oh, really cool, by the way. But anyway, so we're going to use the other one this year. So you guys can look at these afterwards and see what all the different Haggadahs look like. But whatever you find, your Haggadah will be pretty cool. There's a few things that a Haggadah has to have, though. So we're going to go through that tonight and see what a Haggadah consists of. Right? So the 15 steps are put in order for us for memorization. In fact, we actually sing a little song to remember the 15 steps of the Haggadah. It helps us out. I'll maybe try and teach it to you guys tonight. Karen asked if there's any songs tonight, so maybe I'll have to sing at least one. We'll see how that goes. So the 15 steps didn't exist in the time of Moses. It didn't exist in the time of Yeshua. They came later through a group of guys called the French Toasifists. Every time I read their name, I get hungry for French toast. Right? I don't know what it means. Bunch of French dudes who wrote commentary on the Talmud and the laws and how to keep it. So they put it together for us into 15 easy to follow steps that will get you there and help you survive the night. Now, the number 15 is very symbolic for Pesach. In fact, the whole Pesach has got a whole bunch of numbers. Number 1, number 2, number 3, all the way up to 15. Every number has got symbolism in the Pesach story. But 15 seems to be some very symbolic one, because we're looking at the Haggadah tonight. I thought maybe we could look at a few things in Pesach that talk about the number 15. So, first of all, the day itself occurs on the 15th of Nisan, right? So it's the 15th of the month. The song at the sea, we sing on Pesach, on the 7th day of Pesach is when we cross the sea. And many of you guys crossed the sea just to get in here tonight with a storm outside. So there's 15 waves in the song at the sea. This is how it looks in the Torah scroll, the Song of the Sea, when we read it, the Oz Yashir. And look at the way it's structured. It looks like the waves and the Israelites passing through the middle, right? How the sea split. So that's how it's written in a Torah scroll. That's how Moses wrote it down for us. Till today, we still got it like in our Torah scroll. And if you count it properly with each verse, there's 15 different waves just in the way that we cross the sea. So that's another interesting one, 15. And that's where we get 15 steps from. Also, if you guys want to go really far out, you can say it's in Exodus chapter 15 that this occurs, by the way. Not that the Toasifists had the chapter numbers in their days, but anyway, here's the extra one. And then also the name of God that's used in the song. Over there, it uses the first 2 letters of God's divine name. It's got the Yud and the Hey. So if you know your numerical values, Yud is how much? 10. And Hey would obviously then be 5. So God uses that name in the song as well. That's the name that he used at that point of redemption, split the sea for us. That's another reason why 15 is a big number during Pesach. And of course, there's a song we sing, maybe I'll just show it to you guys tonight, called the Dayenu. And there's 15 verses in that song as well. It's a song of thanksgiving, saying if God had only brought us out of Egypt, that would have been enough. But he did more. He sent plagues, etc., etc., etc. There's 15 verses in the Dayenu. And of course, it reminds us of entering the temple, because if you're going in from the south side, you can still visit it today, by the way. There's 15 steps going up to the temple. And when you go up these 15 steps, a nice thing to do in the pilgrimage festivals is to recite the 15 Psalms of Ascent. That's what they were written for, the Psalms of Ascent, or as you go up to the temple. In fact, the Levites would sing these songs as they went up the steps into the temple. Some of the steps are nice and wide, so you can get a lot of people in there singing at the same time. It's quite nice. But yeah, so there's a whole bunch of symbolism just in number 15, not to mention all the other numbers. If you guys can think of any more, please do, and make it part of your Pesach celebration. Okay. Psalms, yeah, I guess, yeah. Written by David, yeah. Yeah, to heal him. Yeah. Every state. Alright, don't sing that song. That wasn't written by David, by the way. Alright, so let's look into the things. We're going to have to make ourselves a list of things we have to do, right? Here are the 15 steps, just so you guys get to know them. The first step is called Kadesh. Who can guess what Kadesh means? Kadosh means holy, right? right? But Kadesh means to make something holy. So it's the sanctification of the night. Remember, every festival we start off by sanctifying over a cup of wine. Even Friday nights, the Sabbath, we sanctify. Every celebration meal we sanctify with a cup of wine. So the first thing we do in our Seder is we do Kadesh. So that would be our first glass. How many glasses of wine do we drink on Pesach? 4. Okay, we'll talk about that as well. The second step is called Urchatz. Urchatz is a washing of the hands. So we perform a washing of the hands as our second step. Right? Then we do something called karpas. Can anyone guess what that little leaf is over there? Parsley. Yes. So what we do is we take the parsley, or we'll discuss the other options you can use. You can use potato, you can use other stuff, lettuce. And you dip it into salt water or vinegar, and you eat that. We'll discuss that later as to why we do it. Then the fourth step we do is called yachatz. What we do is we take a piece of matzah, specifically the middle one of the 3, and we break it as close to half as possible. And what we do is we go and hide the bigger piece. Later on we'll go find it and we'll have that for dessert. Right? If you haven't had enough matzah, we'll have more matzah for dessert. That's yachatz. The fifth step is magid, which basically is the telling of the whole story, of the Pesach story. So that's what magid is. We tell the Pesach story, we read a whole bunch of verses, and we remind ourselves of the plagues and everything that happened. Step number 6 is washing of the hands again. Right? Just in case you missed the first one. We'll discuss as to why we do that. Step number 7, we do the blessing before eating. So we do the hamotzi blessing. Then we eat. We eat the matzah. Step number 8. Step number 9 is maror. Who knows what maror is? It's the bitter herbs. You're right. Yeah, the bitter herbs. We eat this horrible stuff. Oh, it's not nice. We'll go through that. We'll sing it and etc. Don't worry. And step number 10 is called korech. There we eat a sandwich. So we take a sandwich. We take 2 pieces of matzah, we put lettuce inside, and we put some of the bitter herbs, and we put some of the nice sweet stuff inside as well, and we eat the sandwich. Okay? Then we do step number 11, the one that everyone was waiting for all night long. Shulchan Aruch is the meal. You finally eat. So it takes us 10 steps to get to the food. So be prepared, okay, that you're going to get hungry for the first few steps, because it takes a while to get through everything, especially the mud eat section. That's usually the longest one. So it's going to take a while before we get to proper eating. Until then, we're going to have little morsels of matzah and bitter herbs, etc., etc. Step number 12 is called tzafun. Remember we hid that piece of matzah earlier at step number 4? Tzafun, now we go and find it. That's our pudding. So we have to go find our pudding. We're going to go find the tzafun. The kids are actually going to go search for it. And then step number 13, after we've eaten, we give thanks, right? The barech. So we do the Birkat HaMazon, and we also sing songs of halal. We sang it last week, Shabbos, because it was Rosh Chodesh and Shabbos, so we did the halal. And then we end off, number 15 is nirtza. It's the conclusion. So those are the 15 steps of your Pesach Seder. Now, how many of you can memorize them? I think you must sit here where you can see. It's much easier. You're going to keep peeking over the table. Come sit here. So what I'll do is I'll teach you guys quickly. I'll just sing it for you. I'll teach it to you guys properly on Pesach night. Then you can know it. 14 is the Hallel. Hallel. It's Psalm 118 through Psalm 136. Actually, Psalm 113 through 136. 113 through 136. Yeah. But I'll go through each of these step by step later. So for now, I just want you guys to get the overview of the 15 steps. And then with the song, you can also do like hand motions to help you remember it. So I'll do a quick one for you guys, right? But you might want to close your ears. It goes like this, right? So hand washing. First is the Kadesh, so we hold a cup of wine. Second is the Urchatz, so we wash our hands. Third is the Karpas, so we dip with his hand. Yachatz, we break and hide. Magid is we read the story. Rochza, we wash hands again. Motzi, we hold up the bread and bless. Matzah, we eat the matzah. 9 is maror, the bitter herbs, so they stink. So we go like this. Right, 10 is the korech, so we make like we're eating a burger or a sandwich. 11 is the shulchan aruch, so we made the meal. 12 is tzafun, because we search out for the stuff. 13 is the barech, so we bless. 14 is halal, so we praise. And then 15 is nirtza. We're done. So they sing it. They go like this. Kadesh urchatz, karpas yachatz, magid rochza, motzi matzah, maror korech, shulchan orech, tzafun barech, hallel nirtza. There you go. Here's my performance of your movie. Okay, so those are the 15 steps, hey?
We can do a little bit faster than what you did now.
Maybe, I don't know, we'll see how it goes. We'll try it later again, maybe. Okay, So those are the 15 steps. Now, in addition to this, on the Pesach Seder table, you have a Seder plate, right? Now, why do we have a Seder plate? So we can say the right things, okay? It helps us to remember everything we need to do on the night. Now, we've got 6 elements on our Seder plate that you're going to look at. Let's start at the top. The first one is a roasted bone. The Hebrew for that is a zeroah. So basically the reason why we put that on our Seder plate is to remind us of the Pesach lamb, right? So we take a roasted bone. Some people take a chicken bone and roast it. Some people have some lamb shanks earlier in the week and keep the bone specifically for the Pesach Seder and put it on the plate, right? To remind us of the Pesach lamb that would have been sacrificed if the temple was still standing. But in addition to that, there was another sacrifice you'd bring in the festivals, right? Your Haggadah offering. So that's what the egg is for, right? It wasn't left there by the Easter bunny. Easter bunny is not Jewish, by the way. So we have a roasted egg to remind us of the festival offering, the Haggadah offering, which was also brought in addition to the Pesach lamb itself. So your main meal that you would eat on that night would be this. This is what you eat at your Shulchan Aruch. Yes, the hard-boiled one that's completely burnt and roasted to the point of no return. Yeah, so you shouldn't leave one that's nice that you can use, right? Yeah, so it's that one. So that was the main meat that you would eat at your meal. And then your Pesach lamb you would actually have for pudding, because the Torah says you must be satisfied by the lamb, right? You have to have a certain amount of people eating from it, and you all have to be satiated by it. So you don't want to eat it and then there's people still hungry and there's no lamb left over. So you usually have that for pudding. Okay. Bottom right here you've got something called chazaret, which is lettuce, right? Because let us pray. Which is supposed to remind us of the bitterness of slavery. I don't know how many of you consider lettuce bitter. But specifically, it's actually meant to be romaine lettuce. Why would we need romaine lettuce? Maybe because, I don't know, no idea. Blame the Romanians for that one. But the thing about romaine lettuce is that tradition says that if you leave romaine lettuce to grow for too long, it becomes bitter. The ones we buy at Woolies or Pick n Pay or wherever, those ones aren't that bitter because they pluck them at a good time. And you can eat them nicely. But if you eat the stem after it's been grown for too long, it itself is bitter. So you can use lettuce as one of your bitter herbs. But we've got another bitter herb there on the top left. Maror. You see maror there on top, the bitter herb? That is usually horseradish. Or we'll see some other stuff later when we go through it. So usually it's horseradish. Once again, the bitterness is reminding us of the bitterness of the slavery in Egypt. It's a time where we have to remember our slavery in Egypt. Okay, bottom left we've got the karpas, the parsley. We're going to dip that in the salt water, which is supposed to remind us of about 2 things. The betrayal of Joseph, because that's where our exile down to Egypt began. Right? And the brothers went and sold Joseph off, and he went down to Egypt eventually. And in addition, the tears that we cried while we were in Egypt with all the suffering we were going through, and how our tears opened the gates of heaven for our prayers to be answered. And the last thing at the bottom here, we've got something called charuset. This is the only one actually worth spending your taste buds on. It's actually quite nice. It's a bunch of mixed fruit. They call it a mixed fruit compote. Is that how you pronounce the word? Compote. Compote. I don't know. It's French. It might be compote. Anyway, it's nice. It's mixed fruits. We take nuts, walnuts, and we take raisins, and we take grapes, and we take wine, and we take pomegranates. There's a few ingredients that we use that we get from a verse in the Song of Songs, and we mix it together to make like this nice spread. Now, the reason why we make this spread is because it's supposed to remind us of the mortar, the cement that we had to use, the mud and stuff, to build the bricks, to make the bricks in Egypt. Remember, Pharaoh took away our straw and everything. So to remind us of how we used to build, I don't know, we might have built the pyramids for all we know. So yeah, so that is your Seder plate. That's a summary of the Seder plate. Now, every table that we're going to have here at our Seder is going to have its own Seder plate. It's usually how it works. But if you have a long table for your second Seder at home or for next year, you only need 1 Seder plate for your whole table. So just make 1, and you don't eat any of the stuff necessarily. You can keep it for decoration if you want, but you can also eat like the charuset and the parsley and that stuff. You're not going to eat the egg and you're not going to eat the bone. So don't break your teeth on those 2. Okay. Alright, another thing we have on the table is we have to have 3 matzahs at least. Now these 3 matzahs are the ones we can use symbolically for the breaking and for the blessing. But in addition to this, you can have an extra box of matzahs on your table anyway, because you're going to need it to fill up every time we have to eat. Now, 3 matzahs on top of each other. Top one and bottom one will stay whole, the middle one will be broken. Who knows why on earth do we have 3 matzahs? What ideas have you guys got? Why would we have 3 matzahs? Why not 1? Why not 2? Why not 5? Why not 15, by the way? Why 3? Any ideas? Dumbfounded? Eh? Okay, let me tell you. So here's one of the oldest commentaries we've got. Tells us that, well, we at least need two. Why do we need two? Because the two matzahs, the bottom one and the top one, remind us of the double portion of manna that Hashem gave us when we came out of Egypt. But there's a problem though. There's also a mitzvah. So that was the mitzvah, by the way, to remember how Hashem brought us out and gave us food. We also have to eat matzah on the night. So that needs another piece of matzah so that we can fulfill that mitzvah as well. Therefore, we have 3 matzahs. Are you guys convinced by that argument? Me neither. Right? So to be honest with you, we actually have no idea why we have to have 3. We can understand the 2. For example, Rashi also tells us that you have to have at least 2 matzahs. But you can even break one of those 2 and then you're left with 1.5. Now, one of the oldest commentaries we've got is written in a Seder known as the Machzor Vitri. And the Machzor Vitri actually mentions the very same thing. It says, you must have 3 matzahs. 2 of them are for the manna. The third one, it has no idea. So what it says is, the third one you have to break, you're not allowed to eat it whole. That's all it says. So that's all we know about this third matzah. So where in history this tradition came in that we have to have 3 matzahs, no one can tell you. No one really knows. But here's some other traditions that developed in later years from people like the Rokiach and the Radak and all of them explaining to us why they think we've got 3 matzahs. Maybe it refers to Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. Our 3 patriarchs, right? It's because of them and their merit that we were saved from Egypt. Interesting one, right? Especially if you're Messianic and you like to go deep into things. Because if each of them represents one of the 3, that would be Abraham. The middle one would be Isaac, which was the one that was broken. Why? Because Isaac was sacrificed on the altar. And according to the Midrash, he actually did die and was resurrected. Maybe that's pointing to something. Who knows? You never know. Another tradition says that it represents 3 shifts of the Pesach sacrifice. Can you guys remember that? We spoke about that, I think, in the first lesson. That when you took your sacrifice, you had to register. And there were 3 shifts that you had to register in. The early comers, the middle comers, and the late comers. So maybe it's to refer to those 3 specific ones. And also the 3 houses of Israel. Remember those 3 shifts? We got that from a verse that said the whole congregation, the community, and Israel must come. That's where we got the 3 from. So there's another tradition that says it's 3 houses of Israel, which is, who knows the 3 houses of Israel? The Kohanim, the Levites, and the general Israelites. Those are the 3 houses of Israel. Right? So the Kohen, Levi, and Israel. Maybe that's referring to the 3 of them as well. Okay? But we can also get a bit creative and guess. Now, who knows what we call that middle one that we break? Does anyone know the weird name we've got for it? It tastes very bad, so we start off by calling it af. Afikomen, yes, correct. What kind of a word is afikomen? What language does that sound like? Does it sound Hebrew to you? It's not. It's actually Greek. That's the third one. This weird one that we have no idea why we've got it is actually called by a Greek name, right? Which means he who is coming, or that which is to come. So somehow, whatever the reason is for bringing it in, this middle matzah that gets broken and hidden, that is supposed to point us towards something in the future that is still to come. It's supposed to keep our minds on the future. Now, Christianity and a lot of Messianic scholars will point out that Afikomen is probably something that was brought into the Pesach Seder specifically by the Messianic believers of the early century. And, it's not that far off. It makes sense to me because our gospel records of the Pesach Seder that Yeshua and his disciples kept is the oldest written source of the Pesach Seder. Nothing else has been found earlier than our gospel writings that records the Pesach Seder and the steps like Yeshua and his disciples kept. So the Pesach Seder was an important thing for early Christianity and Messianic Judaism from the start because it was in our scriptures. So would they have brought that in? Very possible. Right? And there's a lot of imagery if you want to go and say that the Afikomen represents Yeshua, who gets hidden at the beginning of it and later on gets revealed as our pudding and the final redemption as we end off the Pesach Seder. So that's pretty cool to keep in mind when we do all the blessings when we go and hide the Afikomen. Okay. 4 glasses of wine. Why do we drink 4 glasses of wine? Just because? There's a reason for it. Anyone know? Come on, you guys should know this one. Okay. So there's a verse in Exodus 6 verse 6 that talks about 4 forms of redemption when God saved us from Egypt. It says, therefore say to the people of Israel, I am Hashem, I will free you from the forced labor of the Egyptians, rescue you from their oppression, and redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. I will take you as my people and I will be your God. So those 4 expressions are explained to be the reason why we drink 4 cups of wine on this night. It's supposed to remind us of those 4. Now, that has been codified in Jewish law for us not by Rashi, but Rashi is the one who explains to us that this is why we drink the 4. Now, the Midrash Rabbah goes on to explain there's actually more examples that we could use. This was the one that we eventually chose upon, so today this is what we focus on. But originally the Talmud discussed that maybe it even refers to the 4 cups of Pharaoh's butler's dream. Remember that story? Yeah, so there were 4 cups there as well. Or the 4 decrees that Pharaoh put up against us, where he made life more difficult for us. Or it could refer to the 4 exiles in history. Currently we're in the last exile. Or it could refer to the 4 letters of God's mighty name by which he brought us out of Egypt and saved us in the desert, right? So all these options are available. So what we need to do now is we need to go look at a bunch of the verses and figure out what from the Bible are we required to do on Pesach night. We're going to make a list so that we can figure out, because I asked you guys earlier, what are we supposed to do? And no one could answer, right? Because you don't think about it. So we have to do a bit of biblical sleuth work. We have to go and search and do some detective work. So here's a verse for you guys, easy one. Leviticus 23, which is God's day planner, says, on the first day you are to have a holy convocation. Don't do any kind of ordinary work. So what must we do on the first night? What mitzvahs can we add to our list? Well, we're not supposed to work, right? But that's a negative mitzvah. So there's not really something active that we can do on the night. Rather, we cease from working. Okay? But the first part says you are to have a holy convocation. Convocation, the Hebrew word, actually means you shall make a proclamation. You shall say something to set apart this day as holy from the rest of the days. So how do we do that? We declare or proclaim it as a holy day. Usually we do that with a cup of wine, right? So that's the first thing we're going to do on Pesach. Let's find another mitzvah for us to do. Deuteronomy 16 says, thus you will remember the day that you left the land of Egypt as long as you live. So how can we do that on the first night of Pesach? We have to remember. Somehow we have to remember the Exodus from Egypt. So we have a big meal, we tell stories, and we do all these things to help us remember the Exodus from Egypt. Otherwise we forget. It's not good to forget, right? It happens. There's another verse. You shall rejoice at your festival. It's a mitzvah. So we're going to rejoice on Pesach. How do you rejoice on Pesach? We just learned about it. 4 cups of wine. Yeah? Exactly. That's where the joy comes from. Are you going to sleep? Yeah. You might have to book a room, yeah? That's why the timing says from 6 till late. Alright, here's another one. Exodus 12 says, they are to eat the meat roasted in the fire. They are to eat it with matzah and maror. So there's a mitzvah for us in the night. We are to eat the lamb with matzah and maror. Problem, we have no temple, can't do the sacrifice. So we cut out the lamb, but we still eat matzah and maror. Now, matzah is still a biblical commandment. You would think this commandment doesn't apply because there's no temple. You'd think all 3 of these, this is one commandment, right? You eat matzah with, the lamb with matzah and maror. But if there's no lamb, then the whole commandment doesn't apply. So the commandment of eating matzah does still apply, because there's a separate verse that says, you shall eat matzah for 7 days. We've read that. Maror, however, seems to be a rabbinic commandment. The rabbis say that's a rabbinic commandment just to help us remember the Pesach Seder, because it's a commandment on its own to remember this mitzvah of eating the lamb with the matzah and the maror. So we can eat matzah and maror, but remember it's a commandment to remember this as well. So we also want to remember the Pesach lamb. So what we'll do is we're going to symbolically represent the Pesach lamb somehow in this night. Now, we're not going to eat the lamb itself or eat any lamb, because it will make it look like we're replacing the lamb. So we can't eat that. But what can we eat instead of the lamb? More matzah. Why not? We've got a big stock, right? So what we do is we have the afikomen that I told you that we go and hide. The afikomen actually represents the Pesach lamb itself. Right? And that's why we eat that as pudding. Because remember, I said earlier, you would eat the lamb as pudding so that you will be fulfilled. So today, the afikomen fulfills that purpose of the Pesach lamb. Very interesting, eh? Cool, so there's our first 5 things. Let's carry on. Let's see what else we can add to our list. Exodus 13:8 says, on that day you are to tell your son, it is because of what Hashem did for me when I left Egypt. Unfortunately, the English sells us short. Now the Hebrew there where it says because of what, uses the Hebrew word zois, which basically means it's because of this. But this is meant in a type of way as you are pointing to something. That's why, for example, the kosher laws. Moses says this is kosher, and this is kosher, and this is not kosher. He uses the word zois. So the Midrash tells us that every single animal in the world actually came to Moses. And he held up the animal and said, this zois you shall not eat. And he moved it away. And he said, oh, look, this one. He said, he held up the pig and said, this is not a split hoof, but it doesn't chew the cud. So we have to point towards something on the Pesach night and tell our children, this is because of what Hashem did for me when I left Egypt. So somehow we need to make a symbolism. We need to tell the children using visual aids. So there's a bunch of stuff we can do, right? We've got the whole Seder plate that we use. We've got the 10 plagues that I put up here for you guys. Many people have different traditions in their homes of how they do it. Some people make 10 plagues flavored foods or stuff. Like, with example, for the water turning to blood, they freeze pomegranates and stuff into a block of ice. So it looks like water turning to blood. Frogs, you sometimes get these little, these toy frogs that you can flick around and shoot at each other. Hail, you can bring, I don't know, ping pong balls and stuff. In darkness, you can turn off the lights, etc., etc. So we try and make an effort so that it's visually attractive to the kids so that they can remember what happened in the Seder. Other stuff we do, we lean to the left while we eat and drink. We pour for each other, we don't pour for ourselves. We do all these little things for the sake of teaching our children, this is what Hashem did for me. Okay, that's number 6. Let's add another one. Exodus 12:26. When your children ask you, what do you mean by this ceremony? Say, it is the sacrifice of Hashem's Pesach. So what does that tell us? What can we derive from this that we have to do on Pesach night? Give me some ideas. What can we derive from this? Any mitzvahs that we should do on Pesach to help us fulfill this mitzvah? Well, first of all, it says the children have to ask a question. Right? Here's another one from Deuteronomy 6. It says, someday your child will ask you, what is the meaning of the instructions, the laws, the rulings which Hashem our God has laid down for you? Then you will tell your child, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and Hashem brought us out of Egypt with a strong hand. So once again, you've got the kids asking you a question, and you answering the kids. So let's do that. Let's do that on the Pesach Seder. Let's make the children curious so that they will ask questions. We do that through all these weird things. Washing hands twice, which makes no sense. Usually we just wash one time, right? So the kids are going to end up asking, hey, why on this night do we wash hands twice, whereas every other night we wash hands only once? Or you drink 4 glasses of wine. Kids are supposed to say, why are you drinking 4 glasses of wine? That's not normal. Depending on who you are and your kids, right, by the way. If your kids don't ask this question, then I'm going to have a meeting with you guys. Okay, but in addition to that as well, we also lean to the left while we drink each time, like we're royalty. The kids have to ask us, well, why are we doing this, right? Or why do we eat the bitter herbs twice? Or why do we do a blessing for the bitter herbs if we're going to do a blessing before eating bread? Why do we eat this weird sandwich, the Hillel sandwich, the korech? So we have to make the kids curious. So we do all these things in order to lead them towards asking us questions, because that is a biblical commandment of what's going to happen on Pesach. So that way we are proactively fulfilling the Torah. In addition to this, we have to make the kids ask us questions. So maybe we should put together a list of questions that the kids can ask us, right? The Manishtana. So we'll see if we find that in the Haggadah. Check this out though. Here's another thing we can derive from this verses. Look at all this personalization of the pronouns. It says, on that day you are to tell your son, it is because of what Hashem did for me when I left Egypt. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and Hashem brought us out of Egypt with a strong hand. Hashem worked great and terrible signs and wonders against Egypt, Pharaoh and all his household before our very eyes. He brought us out from there in order to bring us to the land that he had sworn to our ancestors that he would give us. So how can we make these verses more prominent in our minds on the Pesach night? Well, it's very personal. We have to make the Seder very personal. We need to relive and identify with the Exodus from Egypt. In fact, the Talmud tells us that every single person at the Seder should feel as if he personally just came out of Egypt. Because this is a commandment, Deuteronomy 6, that we are supposed to answer this to our kids after they ask us a question. We're not supposed to say our ancestors were brought out, they were slaves and brought out. we have to recite this. It says, we were slaves in Egypt. So the Torah actually makes us consider ourselves as that very generation that came out of the Exodus from Egypt. Pretty cool. Right, so we need to do it, personalize it, and how do we do that? Well, we tell the children about the stories. We make them participate in everything we do. We make things around us symbolic so that we remember that we came out of Egypt. That was number 9 to add to our list. Yeah, what's the last one we can add to our list? Quick question. The Pesach sacrifice, which category does it fall under? There are 5 categories, right? We learned about it last week in the Parashat Vayikra. There's a burnt offering, there's a grain offering, there's a sin offering, there's a guilt offering, and there's a peace offering. Which one is the Pesach offering? Peace. Yes, we did this I think on the first night, right? It's a peace offering. Ah, you thought you were good. Let me break it down to you. There's 2 types of peace offerings. Which one of these do you think it is? Either a vow or a voluntary offering, or a thanksgiving offering. Which one do you guys think it is? Thanksgiving, vow, anyone? Okay, let's look at this. Here's the difference. A vow or a voluntary offering has no obligation. You're not obligated to bring it. Whereas a thanksgiving offering is obligatory in certain situations. For example, if you were to travel across the seas and survive, you survived a massive situation of danger. You'd have to go back to the temple and give a thanksgiving offering to Hashem. If you survived being sick or had a dangerous sickness, you almost died, you have to go and give a thanksgiving offering after surviving. If you survived a treacherous journey in the desert, you have to bring a thanksgiving offering. And there's many other types of ideas as to when you should bring a thanksgiving offering as well, where it becomes obligatory upon you. Okay. The vow offering also, you've got 2 days to eat it, whereas the thanksgiving offering, you've only got 1 day to eat it. The vow of voluntary offering, you're not supposed to have any side dishes with it when you eat it, whereas the thanksgiving offering, you have to eat it with bread. So quite clearly, it falls, the Pesach sacrifice falls under a thanksgiving offering. Okay, so we need to give thanks on this night. How are we going to get it right to do a thanksgiving offering on this night? We don't have a temple, so we can't do it. So how are we going to remember to give thanks? Well, here's how Psalm 107 tells us. Verse 21. Let them give thanks to Hashem for His grace, for His wonders bestowed on humanity. Let them offer sacrifices of thanksgiving, that's a sacrifice, and proclaim His great deeds with songs of joy. So that's one way we can do it. We can sing songs of joy at the Pesach Seder. Or should we sing that in the morning in the shul service or in the afternoon at the end of Pesach? What time of day are we supposed to give thanks? Eh? Why? You're right, but why? Here's a verse for you. Isaiah 30 verse 29 says, your song will be like one that is sung on a night when a holy feast is kept, and your hearts will be happy. Holy feast there, the word is Chag. Chag refers to a holiday, but more specifically to the 3 pilgrimage festivals. Those are the big 3. What are the big 3? Do you guys know? It's Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. Those are the 3 pilgrimage festivals that we would go up to Jerusalem for. Which one of them commemorates something that happened at night? Pesach, because in the middle of the night, we came out, right? The other 2 don't have anything with night. Shavuot was the giving of the Torah. That happened in the morning. That's why we do the Torah reading in the morning service. And Sukkot, well, that happened throughout the whole Exodus out of the wilderness. So Pesach is specifically the one about the night. So we're going to add this to our list. We have to sing songs of praise and thanksgiving on Pesach night. And that is our list. There's our 10 biblical to-do lists for Pesach. Number 1, we should declare and proclaim a holy day through the Kaddish maybe. That's a good idea. Get a glass of wine and we can bless it. We must remember the Exodus from Egypt. So we have a Seder plate. We have all these things that are reminders. We must rejoice. So we have 4 glasses of wine and we sing songs. And we always try and be merry on the night. We must eat matzah with the maror. So we eat it on our Seder plate. We must symbolically represent the Pesach lamb. So we have the afikomen and the bone. Tell your children using visual aids. So we've got all these cool things to keep the children interested. We need to make the children curious. So we do all sorts of weird things that no one expects from us. So the kids are going to ask, why are we doing this? It's different. And then the kids actually have to ask the questions. Then we have to relive and identify with the Exodus itself. Make it personal as if you yourself came out of Egypt. And we have to sing songs of praise and thanksgiving. Okay, we've come a long way since I asked the question, are there any commandments for the night of Pesach? Here we've derived at least 10. So let's see. A good way to maybe help us fulfill these 10 commandments is to put them into book form and into a Seder that we can do every single year to make sure we fulfill them. That's what the Haggadah is all about. But there's one more mitzvah that we are missing that you will not find in the traditional Pesach Haggadah. Any ideas? But you will find them in the one we're doing this year and any other Messianic one. Remembrance of Yeshua. Very important one. So here's what it says in Mark 14:22. While they were eating, Yeshua took a piece of matzah, made the bracha, broke it, gave it to them and said, "Take it, this is my body." Also he took a cup of wine, made a bracha and gave it to them, and they all drank. And he said to them, "This is my blood, which ratifies the new covenant, my blood shed on behalf of many people. Yes, I tell you, I will not drink this fruit of the vine again until the day I drink new wine in the kingdom of God." Now, Paul goes and quotes this in 1 Corinthians saying, "For what I received from the Lord is just what I passed on to you." By the way, passed on. Paul talks a lot about this. Passed on is like the oral Torah. It's passed on to us. It's the oral traditions. That the Lord Yeshua, on the night that he was betrayed, took the bread, and after he made the bracha, he broke it and said, "This is my body which is for you." And listen to this. "Do this as a memorial to me." So that's another mitzvah that we as believers get to do on Pesach night. Likewise, also the cup after the meal, saying, "This cup is the new covenant, effected by my blood. Do this as often as you drink it as a memorial to me." So we have to remember Yeshua on Pesach night when we partake of this. "For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the death of the Lord until he comes." So there you go. We'll add that to our list, number 11. To eat and drink in remembrance of Yeshua. This is his body that was given for us. This is the cup of the new covenant. There's actually a pretty cool song that we sing on Meal of Messiah that I'll teach you guys next time we have a Meal of Messiah together. Alrighty. So there's our 15 steps. Remember them? Kadesh Urchatz, Karpas Yachatz, Magi Hidrochza, Motzi Matzah, Maror Korech, Shulchan Orech, Tzafun Barech, Hallel Nirtzah. Good, you guys got the hand motions. Look at that. We can take you guys to grade 2 now. Alrighty. So let's go through those 15 steps one by one and see what we can learn, if there's anything new that we can learn. Okay. First one was Kaddish. Now, Leviticus 23, we said on the first day you are to have a holy convocation. Don't do any kind of ordinary work. So we take our first of our 4 cups then. We call it the cup of sanctification because we are sanctifying the festival itself. But we do 2 blessings. We do the blessing on Kiddush, the Berei Pri Hagafen, and we also do a Shechianu blessing, which is, "Blessed are you, Lord God, King of the universe, who has kept us alive, sustained us, and brought us to this season," or to this moment, because it's a special time. Every festival, we say the Shechianu blessing. Now, here's the question. Which one of those 2 blessings should we do first? The Shechianu, because we have now reached the season, or the wine, because we are now sanctifying the season? Which one should we do first? This is an argument that actually pops up in the Talmud in Tractate Pesachim. So, the rabbis argue with each other and eventually decided that Hillel said, the house of Hillel says, wine should be done first because it is the more frequent mitzvah. Therefore, you've got to do it first. Yeah. So we do both. We do the wine first and then we do the Shechianu blessing. You'll see it in your Haggadah when we get to it. Right, and as you drink that first cup, remember to lean to your left. Don't lean to your right. Any ideas why? Right? Egypt, no. Fall asleep, no. Well, you might die, that's why. If you lean right and eat bitter stuff and sharp things and drink wine, it's got more chance of going down your esophagus instead of, well, down the wrong pipe. You're going to end up choking yourself. So we lean left so that we don't end up choking ourselves. Right, so please, that's very important. If someone dies on Pesach, then we all become unclean. Straight up. No, straight up. Royalty doesn't drink like that. We're trying to be free. We're not slaves anymore. So we're reclining. Now the reason why we recline, by the way, now that you brought that up, is because by the time that the Seder traditions were put in place, the chief in charge were the Romans. And the Romans, whenever they were royalty, they would always, when they ate, they would recline. I don't know if you've seen all the pictures and the photos and all the movies of the Romans. They always recline on these nice couches and eat their grapes and have the people waving them with palm branches, right? So if the Exodus was to, all these traditions were brought in a different era of history. Like if it was brought in today, we would do something else to make it look like we're free. I don't know, what do the ruling people do nowadays? I think Okene Kenene, he ate sushi off of models' bodies. Maybe we could do that if it was brought today. That's problematic, eh? Okay, so step number 2 was the urchatz, the washing of the hands. But this is weird though, right? We wash the hands usually before we eat bread. But in the Pesach Seder, no blessing is recited before the washing of hands at this first one, the urchatz. Any idea why? Well, who can remember step number 3? Kadesh urchatz. Karpas, yes, we dip the stuff. So we're eating salt water and parsley. What do we usually do hand washing for? Which food? Bread. So we're not even eating bread now, right? So why on earth are we washing our hands? This is one of the things that's supposed to get the kids asking questions, saying, hey, wait a minute, why are you doing the washing of hands, and why is there no blessing, and why we're not even eating bread, right? Now the reason for this is because in Talmudic times, in Tanaic times, it was actually a law that you had to wash your hands before dipping any food into any liquid. Remember we spoke about this on Shabbat, about that story in Mark chapter 7 where some of the Pharisees came and said, hey, your disciples are eating with unwashed hands. And we spoke about the law of washing hands before any food being a law in that specific time of Yeshua. It was an elective Pharisaic law, right? It wasn't applicable to all of Judaism, and it also wasn't applicable outside of the temple era. So now that the temple is destroyed, that law doesn't apply today. Right? Today we wash hands before bread for a different reason. It's a bit separate from that. So in those days, they would wash hands before even dipping food, and that's when they put the traditions together. So today we still do it as a remembrance of that. It's all about the laws of Tuma. Tuma is ritual purity, right? And I think that's why it's called urchatz, because by accident you touch something impure. My mom always says, urchatz, you've done something wrong. I think that's an easy way to remember that. Okay. No temple today, so that doesn't apply, we don't have to do it. But those of you that still host rugby parties or people come over to your house to watch something and you put out chips and dip, I still say it's illegal to double dip your chip. Keep that in mind. Especially now with the stereosis around the country. Eh? Okay. It also helps kids to ask questions. So this point is there specifically just to make the kids ask questions. Step 3 was the karpas. We take parsley, or some people take celery, or the easiest one actually to do nowadays is potato. Reason being, parsley is a bit more difficult to clean, to make sure there's no chochas and no bugs inside the parsley. Celery, same problem. You might get these little bugs that actually go and sit in the stem of the celery. So potato, I think that's what we're getting this year. We're getting catering, so we'll see what they give us. But I've got a feeling we're going to get potato this year, just so we can dip that in the salt water. It's dipped in the salt water or in vinegar. But once again, vinegar is a bit more difficult because of the Pesach laws, and to find kosher for Pesach vinegar, some people usually take, some companies take a grain-based vinegar and they add it to all vinegars. But you get kosher for Pesach ones that are made specifically just from grapes, so that'll be fine. But usually salt water is much easier. And the reason for this was it reminds us of Joseph's betrayal, and when Yeshua had his Seder, and people wanted to know who's going to betray him, he said, look for the one who dips with me. So, reminds us of Judas's betrayal, just like the brothers betrayed Joseph. And every year when I do this and I do my dipping in the salt water, I like to look around and see who's dipping with me, just so I can keep an eye on them for the rest of the year. I would suggest you do the same. Alright, step number 4. No, please don't do that. Don't be so judgmental, Pesach. It's freedom. Yachatz. Alright, so we break the middle matzah. They never break in a straight line, by the way. It's basically impossible. When it breaks in half, you're going to take the larger piece to be your afikomen that we're going to hide away. And we're going to put it in a little pocket and a little bag, and we're going to go hide it away. And later on in the night, we'll have the kids search for it again. Kids get reward usually for finding it. You guys can do that at your own home as well if you want on the second night. Then we get to step 5, the magid, which was the reading and the telling of the whole story. Now, before we can tell the story to the kids, they actually have to ask about it. So we need to do something weird to get the kids asking questions again. So what we do is, we pour ourselves a second cup of wine to make them curious. Why would they be curious? Because the kids are supposed to say, Mommy, Daddy, you're having your second cup of wine, but you haven't got any food in your stomach. This is dangerous. Right? So the kids are going to ask questions. So we pour a second cup of wine, but we don't drink it just yet. The second cup is called the cup of deliverance, because remember earlier we spoke about the verse, which represents the 4 cups. So it says God will bring us out, He will deliver us from Egypt. Right? But we don't drink it until much, much later. So you're going to pour this cup, and your mouth is going to water all the way till after the reading of the Maggid. Remember I said the Maggid is the longest section. So it reminds us that we are still waiting for Mashiach. And for us as Messianic believers, I think this is a wonderful thing. We've already had a foretaste of the Messiah, and He's given us the promise, but He has not yet fulfilled everything just yet. He's going to come back, and we need to be ready. So just as we are yearning for that second cup, as we read all these long stories and ask the questions and sing songs, so too we should yearn for the coming of the Mashiach and the redemption. I think it's a cool little thing to keep in mind. Because He says, when you do this, remember me. So it's one way to fulfill that mitzvah. So at this very point, in your Haggadah, you'll see the kids ask 4 questions. The Ma Nishtana questions. It's written out for them. It's actually transliterated in this Haggadah for us this year. So we'll be able to read along. I'm going to ask, I'll probably ask these 2 to sing at least 2 of the questions. There's 4 questions. I'll get 2 of the other kids as well. Maybe we'll teach you guys in Shabbos so that you'll know what you're doing. Those are called the Ma Nishtana. Should I maybe just show you guys what it's like? Here is the Ma Nishtana. Let me find it quick. So in English, they ask, on other nights we can eat regular bread or matzah, but tonight we eat only matzah. What's up with that? Or, on other nights we eat other vegetables, but tonight we eat better herbs. On other nights we do not have to dip our food at all, but tonight we dip twice. On other nights we do not have to sit in a certain way, but tonight we have to recline. So they ask these questions, and usually it's done to a traditional tune. This is how it goes. I'll give you my version. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol haleilot mikol haleilot shebachol haleilot anu ochelin chametz umatzah chametz umatzah halayla hazeh kulo matzah halayla hazeh kulo matzah. You're learning. שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים שאר ירקות, שאר ירקות. הלילה הזה, מרור, מרור. הלילה הזה, מרור, מרור. שבכל הלילות איננו מטבילים אפילו פעם אחת, אפילו פעם אחת. הלילה הזה שתי פעמים, הלילה הזה שתי פעמים. Last one. שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים בין יושבים ובין מסובים, בין יושבים ובין מסובים. הלילה הזה כולנו מסובים, הלילה הזה כולנו מסובים. Yeah, so we'll sing that hopefully on Pesach night. The kids will sing it for us, if all goes well. Alrighty. Cool, anyway, moving on. Carrying on, we're still with the Maggid, right? Now, how do you answer these questions? The kids just asked you 4 questions. Who knows the answer to those questions? Well, good thing we've got a Haggadah which can give us the answers. You can just read it to them, right? Because many times, lots of people don't even know the answers themselves, right? Now, the Talmud says this is how you answer the child. You begin with your disgrace, and then you conclude with the glory. We don't start off by saying, oh, we are so great, we came out of Egypt. You begin with disgrace. So you start with the verses that say, we were slaves. Or another rabbi says, rather, you start with the one that says, originally our fathers were idolaters. Now, those aren't very nice ways to start, is it? In fact, so what they've done is, these are 2 opinions from 2 rabbis. So what you find in the Haggadah is that they've actually taken both opinions and put them both in there together, so that we don't leave one out. But the Haggadah we're doing this year, it's pretty cool, because this one is geared more towards a non-Jew and a newcomer. So instead of the second one saying, originally our fathers were idolaters, they've got a quote from Galatians chapter 4, which says pretty much the same thing. It says, formerly when you did not know God, you were enslaved to those that by nature are not gods. Remember, he says as well, once you were far off, but now you have brought near. So this Haggadah is very cool in the way that it brings the New Testament scriptures out as well to remind you of that. So that's how we tell the children. We start off by saying how bad we were. We were slaves. We were idolaters. Which father of us was an idolater? Jewish people. Well, where did the Jewish people start? With who? Abraham was the first Jew. And his father? Terach had an idol shop. So we say our fathers were idolaters. We're not that great. right? It reminds us to be humble. So all of this teaches us about humility, and we're eating the bread of affliction, and we're not allowed to rejoice in the death of the Egyptians, but we are allowed to rejoice in our redemption. So we need to be very careful that we're not arrogant, and that's what Pesach's all about. Chometz, the rising agent in bread, represents arrogance. We mustn't have this arrogance. I'll show you guys maybe next week when we have a lesson about chometz, how the letters of the word chometz and matzah itself represent not being big-headed and puffed up. We have to be humble. It's one of the main things about Pesach. Okay, so after the 4 questions, we've got a section entitled the 4 children, which says that there are 4 types of children that ask you questions about Pesach. And this is all derived from Scripture. So the 4 children are the wise one, the wicked one, the simple child, and someone who we can just call the nudnik. Doesn't even know how to ask a question. Doesn't know what's going on. Now, don't think of your children as this way. You yourself qualify as one of these 4 as well. So where do you fall? Are you one of the wise children who asks the question in like Deuteronomy 6 that says, what are the testimonies, the statutes, and the laws that the Lord our God has commanded to you? That sounds like a wise child. He wants to learn more. So he wants to know the testimonies, the edus, the statutes, which is the chukim, and the laws, the mishpatim, that the Lord our God has commanded you. So he doesn't just want to keep Pesach. He wants, for the sake of having a fun night, he wants to learn the laws about Pesach. So you answer that child with more, you'll see it when we do it on the night. You give them more information about the laws of Pesach and why we eat the afikomen, etc., etc. So that's the wise child. But you also get the wicked child, who in Exodus 12:26 asks you, what is this service of yours? Sounds very arrogant, doesn't it? Sounds like a rebellious child that you just want to give a hiding to. You can see it in the words that this child is using. He's not saying, what is the service of ours? He's saying, what is the service of yours? They don't want to consider themselves a part of the redeemed people. They don't want to consider themselves as servants of Hashem. So we've got to ask ourselves the question, are we like this child? But you also get the simple child who says, what is this? Mazeh. Right? That's all you can ask. What's this? What's up? You shall say to him, though, we are commemorating the fact that with a strong hand, God took us out from Egypt, from the house of slaves. Exodus 13:14. So he's a simple child. So giving him all the complex explanations that you're going to give to the first child, who's known as the wise child, the chacham, he's going to get even more confused if you tell him about the laws and the commandments and the statutes. A simple child, you give him a simple answer, that we are commemorating the fact that with a strong hand, God took us out from Egypt. That is the summary of the entire Pesach story. So this teaches us a lesson as well in how to raise kids. The Talmud says, you shall raise a child according to its way. Every child's got a different characteristic, a different mind, a different way that they are brought up. So just like these 4 children, each child has a different way that they're going to learn. And the last one doesn't even ask a question. He doesn't know what to say. So you are commanded as a parent, you shall tell your child on that day, it is because of this that God acted for me when I left Egypt. So don't think that this mitzvah applies specifically to the child. It applies to you as a parent. You are commanded to tell your child about the Exodus. Whether your child is religious or not, you are still commanded. So those are the 4 kids, by the way. Okay, let's keep going. So we have to tell them the story of the Exodus. So what we've done in the Haggadahs, our rabbis have put together for us, they told us, basically we take Deuteronomy 26. It's a good place to start. It's a good summary of the story, the summary of what happened as we went down to Egypt and came out. So we do this whole section, we read verses from Deuteronomy 26, 1 or 2 from Exodus as well, etc. Plus we also recite the 10 plagues. Now, when we recite the 10 plagues, we do this fun thing. You'll notice it this year at our Seder. It's transliterated for us, so the Hebrew name is given. So when we name each one, you're going to say the name out loud together. So the first one is blood. The Hebrew for blood is dam. So we're going to take your finger and you're going to put it in that second glass of wine that you've been wanting to drink all this time. And you're going to take out a drop and put it on your plate. We're going to end up with 10 dots on your plate to remind you of the 10 plagues. So you're going to take it and you're going to say dum, dum, dum. And the next one is frogs, which is Tzefardea, Tzefardea, Tzefardea. So we'll do that 10 times out loud. We're going to say it to remind us of the 10 plagues. Okay? Your plate's going to look like a mess, by the way. But anyway, it's part of the fun. There's a tradition, that's funny, that says if you lick your finger to dry it after doing one of these plagues, that plague might come upon you. So be very careful. One of the plagues was darkness, eh? So I remember in the time when we were having load shedding, one of the rabbis said, which one of you was the one who licked your finger after the plague of darkness? Yeah. So Eskom saw you. Okay. In addition, in the Magid, we sing a song called the Dayenu. The Dayenu is, the reason why we sing this song is because we just mentioned the plagues, and the 10 plagues. And we used our finger because it reminds us of the verse that says, when the Pharaoh's magicians were wondering how is this possible, and they said, this must be the finger of God. So if God can perform 10 plagues with one finger, how many can he do with a whole hand? At least 50, right? And when we came to the splitting of the sea, it says God saved us with his mighty right hand. So some Haggadahs go and give us this whole exposition as to the extra, that some say there were 250 miracles performed at the splitting of the sea. And that's why you've got the traditions of the sea splitting into 12 channels, and there was fresh water coming out of the fish's mouths, and there was plants and fruit trees that grew right there in the sea where it split so we could eat while we were walking. And we've got all these traditions of all these miracles that happened. Because if God had only just brought us out of Egypt, it would have been enough. Dayenu. But he also gave us food in the desert. He also gave us water. He also brought us across the sea and dry land. He also brought us to the land of Israel. God's mercies are never ending. So we've got this song called the Dayenu, and after every line we say it would have been enough, Dayenu. This year we'll try and do something because it's in English in this Haggadah. Usually it's in Hebrew, and the Hebrew one's got a tune. It's a fun little one. Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. It's got this whole cool tune. We'll teach it to you guys on the night probably. So we do this prayer called Dayenu in the Magid as well. Then we've got this section where we speak specifically about 3 things. The matzah, the Pesach sacrifice, and the maror. This was instituted by Rabbi Gamliel. He said you are obligated to mention these 3 things at the Seder. That's how he interpreted the verse that says you shall eat it with matzah and maror. So we have to recite it. So what we do is we spend some time talking about each one of these 3 elements and its symbolism. This year, because we're doing this Messianic Stardust Haggadah, we're going to be talking about how the Pesach lamb corresponds to Yeshua, how the matzah corresponds to his body, and how the maror, the bitter herbs, corresponds to his death as well. So we've got a bunch of verses we're going to go through this year to fulfill those 3. And then we shall, Hashem brought us out, we did the 10 plagues, we survived Egypt, therefore we have to give praise. So you've got this section of praise. Let me read it to you guys just so you can check it out. And it's structured very well because it mentions 10 expressions of praise to God, the way that it's structured, to point us back to the 10 Commandments, not the 10 Commandments, but the 10 plagues and the mighty hand God brought us outwards. So here it is. It says, for this reason it is our duty to give thanks, to praise, to acclaim, to glorify, to uplift, to honor, to bless, to elevate, and to applaud the one who did all these miracles for our fathers and for us. That's 9. Right at the end of the blessing we say, and let us offer him a new song, Hallelujah. So that's 10 expressions of praise that we say right after that in the Magid as well. Okay, so there's a lot going on, eh? Then we start a section we know as the Hallel. Start with Psalm 113 and 114, but we do not do the entire Hallel from that point. We only started at that point, at that place. Because we are now reliving the Exodus, we should praise God for what he did. But the Hallel is also supposed to be recited in connection with the Pesach lamb itself. We don't eat the Pesach lamb until later on in our Seder. So we started now, but we don't finish it just yet, we do it later. And then we end off the Magid with the blessing of redemption. Now what they've done in this Messianic Haggadah for us is we've got a blessing from Luke chapter 1 verse 68, which is the blessing that the priest Zechariah said when Yeshua was born. So there's also a blessing about the Messiah being born and the redemption being near. Pretty cool. So we end off with the blessing of redemption. And finally, after all of that, we can drink the second cup, which is now flavored by our pinky fingers or whatever we used to dip in. So don't dig in your nose in between the pouring and the drinking of the second cup. Be very, very careful. Okay. Then we can finally move on and get eating, right? Rochza, we wash our hands before the eating of bread. So we obviously have to say a blessing before the washing, right? Then we do the motzi, the blessing of the bread, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, and then we can finally take the matzah and break pieces off and eat of it. The matzah, we do a blessing for the eating of bread as well. Cool. Then we do the maror, which is the bitter herbs. Now, the bitter herbs are too bitter to eat by themselves, so we do ourselves a favor and we dip it in that cool compote thing called the charoset, that apple and wine mixture, that mortar stuff. We dip it in there so it doesn't kill us completely when we eat it and we don't choke to death. It's not a good thing. Right? Don't lean when you eat this, because you will choke and you will cough. For safety reasons, we sit up straight when we eat the bitter herbs, because it reminds us of the slavery and the bitterness in Egypt. Okay. Then we have the Korach sandwich, number 10. We take matzah. It's also called the Hillel sandwich, because you guys all know Rabbi Hillel, the great Hillel. He was the one who instituted the Hillel sandwich because of the commandment that says, you shall eat the Pesach lamb with matzah and with bitter herbs. So he said, okay, well, I'm going to take matzah, put bitter herbs inside with lettuce, and then put the meat of the Pesach lamb, and then close it off on top with another piece of matzah. So, contrary to Wikipedia, that'll tell you the first guy to invent a sandwich was a guy by the name of Earl of the town of Sandwich. Hillel came before him. This was the first sandwich in history. Yeah, the invention of the sandwich. From that verse, Numbers chapter 9. And then finally, we get to the meal. Finally. Your kids are going to ask you all night long, when do we eat? Then we get to the meal and we can eat. We can have a nice meal. We've got 2 different meats this year, by the way. So it's going to be a very nice big meal. Okay, but before you start eating the meal, you eat something, a little egg appetizer, like egg and salt water. It's this weird little appetizer that we eat to remind us of the Haggadah offering. Remember we spoke about it earlier? The normal sacrifice you bring on the day as well. We can't do that today because there's no temple, so we eat the egg. Other reasons why we eat the egg, some people say, is because we are mourning the destruction of the temple. And the egg is a symbol of the cycle of life. That, yeah, maybe right now we don't have the temple, but God willing in the future we will have it again. Also, Pesach, the first day of Pesach, always falls on the exact same day of the week as what Tisha B'Av will fall that year. Tisha B'Av is the day where both temples were destroyed. So it reminds us that before we can enjoy the meal, we must always have Jerusalem in the front of our minds. Oh Jerusalem, if I forget what you do, if I forget you, let my right hand forget what to do. Remember that verse? So we do that before we enjoy the full meal. Okay, then we eat. And that's when I like to do songs, because usually by this point the kids are going to fall asleep. So you do the songs rather than at the end of the service when they all fall asleep. So we've got a few songs. Here's a list of a few. Haggadah is a very fun song. It's a story about the nation of Israel being compared to one little goat who was attacked by this nation, then that nation, then that nation, then another nation, then another nation. Eventually God came along and saved them. It's a pretty cool song. It's we'll teach it to you on the night. It goes, Haggadah, Haggadah, my father bought for 2 zuzim. Haggadah, Haggadah. Then came a cat and ate the kid. My father bought for 2 zuzim. Haggadah, Haggadah. It's very cool. It goes on and we add a verse every time. Eventually we start talking about and came the ox that drank the water, that quenched the fire, that burnt the stick, that beat the dog, that bit the cat, that ate the kid. My father bought for 2 zuzim. Haggadah, Haggadah. So it's a very cool song. We'll teach it to you guys on the night. It's a very fun one. It's got hand motions in it. Okay. There's other songs. There's one called Uvchein Vayi, which is about the miracle that happened at midnight. There's another one, Uvchein Ve'amartem, you shall say Pesach, the Pesach lamb. There's Kilo Noe, which is to him is praise is due. Or the Adirhu, which is he who is powerful. And then there's another cool one, Who Knows One, where we go through 10 numbers, the first 10 numbers of the, I almost said alphabet there, first 10 numbers of the numerical alphabet, and we find correlations to them in the scriptures. Like, who knows one? What is number 1 in the Bible? Eh? Shema what? Shema Israel, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. The Lord is one. Yes. Who knows 2? Well, the tablets. It goes all the way up to 10, up to 13 actually. So we'll do that on the night as well, hopefully. We're not going to do all these songs because there's too many and I don't know all of them. But we'll do the fun ones. Haggadah, and we'll do Who Knows One probably on the night. Okay. Then finally, after our meal, when we are all full and we've had our 5-course meal that we're having, by the way, then we're going to have the tafun, which is the searching. Remember? We're searching for the afikomen so we can eat that as our pudding. Finding and eating the afikomen. After you've eaten the afikomen, you're not allowed to eat any more food until the next morning or until midnight. Okay? So make sure you've got your full before you eat your afikomen. That is your last top. And then after we've eaten, what do we do always? We bless. Right? So the barak. So we're going to do the birkat hamazon. But you need a cup for this blessing. So we fill ourselves 3rd cup. The cup of blessing. That's what it's called. And this is a very, very important cup for us as Messianics. Because this is the cup that Yeshua took. Because it says in Luke 22 verse 20, he also took the cup after the meal. So he took the cup of blessing and he said, this is my blood, the new covenant. So that is the cup that he talks about in the New Covenant. So every time we get to that cup, we like to think of that and meditate on it and give thanks to Yeshua for giving up his life for us on this very day. And then we end off by doing the whole Birkat Hamazon. We're going to sing it together like we always do. And at the end of the Birkat Hamazon, we immediately pour the fourth cup, which is called the cup of Elijah, because we expect Elijah to come. So much so that we actually go and open the door to see if Elijah pitched up. Why are we waiting for Elijah? Hey? Elijah must come to bring in or herald in the Messiah. Right? So we're expecting the coming of Messiah on Pesach. Why is that? The Talmud actually gives us two opinions. When will Messiah come? First rabbi says we were redeemed in the month of Nisan during the Exodus. So too, in the final era, we will be redeemed in the month of Nisan as well. Therefore, we expect the Messiah to come on Pesach. And therefore, we have the fourth cup, the cup of Elijah, and welcoming Elijah because he has to be Messiah. The other rabbi argues and says, no. We were redeemed in Nisan. In the future, we will be redeemed at the other festivals, which are in the month of Tishri. Yes, we have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot in the month of Tishri. So, when will Messiah come? Nisan or Tishri? I'll give you a good rabbinic answer. Both. Yeshua came and did the initial work of Mashiach ben Yosef on Pesach, when he died for our sins. He spiritually redeemed every single one of us who are followers of his. But he has not yet brought in the final redemption and the ingathering and all the promises of the Messianic era. That will happen, God willing, in the month of Tishri sometime in the future. God willing, next year in Jerusalem. But don't put it down to that, because we can't be sure when he's coming. No one knows the day or hour, so we probably don't know neither. But anyway, that's my guess. Cool, and then after we've done the Birkat Hamazon and the fourth cup with Elijah, then we sing the Halal together, so we'll do it at night. Remember, it reminds us of when we did the sacrifice. In those 3 shifts, the priests would actually sing the Halal while you were doing the sacrifice, and they were catching the blood and carrying it to the altar. Psalm 118 through 136. That's wrong. It's probably from Psalm 113. Oh, well, from there we do from Psalm 118 though, because we already started earlier. That includes the Hodu. You know the Hodu we sing every Shabbos, but the full one, we'll do the full thing. We'll see if we'll sing it. Probably not, because you guys, it depends. We'll see. It's in English, so probably won't be there. A lot of ayayays, which is always fun. Meh? And then we do a special prayer at the end of it called the Nishmas Kochai. We do it every Shabbos now. Because it's such a beautiful prayer, we do it every Shabbos. But originally the Nishmas Kochai was written for Pesach. Now the Talmud refers to it as the blessing of the song. That's how beautiful and important the Nishmas Kochai was. They called it the song. That's a big deal. Remember earlier we spoke about how very possibly the early Christians influenced a few things in the Seder. Like the Afikomen, which is a Greek word, right? This song, the Nishmas Kochai, this prayer, according to the Talmud tradition, was written by the Apostle Peter. But it's so beautiful they decided not to take it out of the Seder, or out of the Haggadah. So they kept it there, but just made up a story saying that Peter was faking his belief in Jesus. He was actually a devout Jew. He was just there as a spy. Very interesting story. So the Nishmas Kochai was probably by Peter specifically for Pesach. And the Talmud sees it as such an important song that you have to do it in the Haggadah. So we do it every year and remind ourselves of that connection as well. That is really cool. Right, but there's no drinking between the third cup and the fourth cup. Remember, the third cup we pour for the blessing, and then the fourth cup we do right before the halal. Why aren't we allowed to drink between these cups? You're allowed to drink during the meal and between the first and second cup. Not between these ones, because we're praying. You can't be drunk while you pray. And the priest would sing the halal while they did the sacrifices in the temple. Remember, for them it was a commandment. They weren't allowed to work or enter the temple if they were under the influence. So we also keep that in the Seder by not drinking between those cups. Okay? Alright. And then we drink the fourth cup at the end of the halal. And then we end off the night with a nirtzah, the conclusion. There's some pretty cool halachas. Check this out. That's saying, if you fell asleep, this is during temple times. If you fell asleep after your meal and awoke, you are still allowed to eat of the Pesach lamb. If, however, everyone fell asleep in the room in your house that was registered for that lamb, and then they woke up, you're not allowed to eat again of that meal, because it is halachically considered a second meal, a completely separate meal, and the place where you eat it is considered a completely separate place, halachically. Remember, the commandment is you shall eat it in that place. So you're not allowed to go to your cousin's house after you've had your Pesach lamb and have some of his, because you weren't registered for that. Very interesting. So Nirza, by that point, you'll see all the kids will be like, don't know what's going on. And there's other laws about if you touch the Pesach, the lamb after midnight, then remember after midnight you're not allowed to eat it, so then you become contaminated because it's a holy thing. That was something that applied only in that time with that elective Pharisaic tradition. And yeah, there we go. Then you end off. And you end off by saying, L'shana haba be'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. That is the Pesach Seder.